In this presentation, we will continue on with part 2 of our comprehensive partnership problem. In this section, we're going to take the data that we have received, the financial statements, and put them into our Excel worksheet, which we will then use to put into the data input into the actual tax return into the 1065. Here is the Form 1065. This is going to be our ultimate goal, is to take the information that's provided to us, the financial statements in essence, and data input them into the Form 1065. However, before we do that, it's usually beneficial to put that information into a worksheet first. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go back to our worksheet. We're going to put this information into the worksheet. So what we have on the left is going to be our financial statements. We want to data input that information into the worksheet on the right. Now, in practice, of course, you probably wouldn't be getting the financial statements on an Excel worksheet. You'd have some other document that possibly you'd be opening up, possibly software, something like QuickBooks, where you can download the information. If you have software that you can actually generate the trial balance, then that can make it easier as well. You can actually look at the trial balance and format that into your Excel worksheet. But in some way, shape, or form, you will typically need to take something and put it into your data input worksheet so that you can format it the way you want to as you enter this information into the tax return and then track things like the adjustments for the M1 adjustments. So what we're going to do, we have the prior year and the current year information on the balance sheet. We're going to put this information into our Excel worksheet over here, our trial balance over here. And what we're doing there is basically converting from a plus and minus format to a debit and credit format. We're converting back to a debit and credit format. The debit and credit format is actually easier to use than a plus and minus format. It's more bulky to have a plus and minus format. So we're basically doing the reverse of what you would do in financial accounting. This is good practice to do to understand your debits and credits. We're going to remove all these kind of subtitles, and we're going to convert these numbers back into the plus and minus format. Now, to do this, I'm going to do some formatting in Excel to make this as easy as possible. We're going to hide the prior year. I don't want to get confused from the prior year to the current year. I'm going to make this as easy as on my eyeballs as possible. So I'm going to put my cursor on B and highlight to C, let go, right-click the selected area and hide there. And I know this is some formatting in Excel. If you want to learn how to put this worksheet together in a very slow method, we have a course on putting this worksheet together. We will do some formatting here a little bit more quickly. So we're going to do this on, we don't need the entries as well, so I just want to see the data right next to each other. So I'm going to put my cursor on G and select over to L, let go, right-click the selected area and hide that area. And there we have our information. Now I'm just going to pull over this information into our trial balance. Now I don't need the subtotals, I don't need the assets, current assets, no, just need to start with cash. So I'm going to pick up the cash, and then I'm going to pick up the accounts receivable, and then I'm going to pick up the inventory, and then the prepaid. And notice I'm just using the formulas to do this. You could type it in there. You could copy and paste it in there. I like to use the formulas. And note, now that we've done a few of them, you can also autofill. Once you have the formula for one, I'm going to delete these and do it a little bit faster. We can put our cursor here, use the autofill button here, and then drag down and it'll autofill down. Now, if you type this in, that's fine. Or if you want to do it that way, any way that you want to do it, it's fine. If I went too far, notice I got total current assets. I can autofill back up or just delete that. And there we have it. Pulling over the numbers then, I'm just going to say this equals the numbers. And once again, I can autofill down and it'll pick up those numbers. So I'm going to put my cursor on the little box right here and left click and drag down, and auto drives it down, and Dr. Phil does the calculation for the autofill. So the autofill. All right, so then we're going to go to skipping these subtotals. We're going down to the equipment. So now we're going to pick up the equipment. Then we're going to pick up the accumulated depreciation. Equipment accumulated depreciation. Then I'm just going to say this equals this number. Notice I'm not picking up the subtotals. We're just picking up the actual numbers and this number. Now note, all of these have been converted in essence from plus and minus to debits. I'm going to represent the debits as plus numbers, credits as negative numbers in this worksheet. I'm not going to have two columns for every debit and credit because it would be, this worksheet would be way too big if I did that. If we had, and plus the formulas are way easier if you do it this way. So in other words, if I had debits and credits for them, I would have 10 columns instead of using 5 columns. And you'll note when we start to look at the formulas to calculate things such as the net income down here, really easy formula to do. We don't have to say plus or minus. We just sum it up if we use the debits as positive and credits as negatives. Therefore, that's what we will do. Now, the accumulated depreciation we have to be careful for because we know it's a subtraction problem over here. And on a debit and credit format, it's a negative number. Therefore, I'm going to make the accumulated depreciation negative of that number. And there we have it. So if I was to add these up so far, I'm at the 698,445. That's the 698,445 here. Ties out. Notice how easy it is to tie it out. I don't have to do any subtraction, no math. Just, Excel does the math for us right there with one sum function. Okay, and then we're going to go back down and continue on, skipping over the subtotals. We don't need those. We're going to be down here in the liabilities, accounts payable. And I'll pick that one up. Now, again, accounts payable is a liability. Therefore, I'm going to say not equals, but negative of that number, picking it up and switching the sign to a credit. Then we're going to pick up the notes payable. Same process. There it is. Enter. I'm going to say negative of the notes payable. And then we have, I'm going to say this equals and scroll back down the partners, which is going to be Tim. Could probably give their full name. And the James, Tim and James. Now we might want to put more detail in our notes here. We might actually want to put this is going to be a capital account for Tim and capital for James. Now this is going to be a little bit more confusing here because these capital accounts is where it's a little bit tricky. These capital accounts are ending capital accounts and already have the closing out of the net income included within them, as well as possibly any distributions included. So that's not what we want on our trial balance, really. So I'm going to make these yellow, and I'm going to say, I have to do something to those in order to reconcile. But I can verify everything else as we go. Then I'm going to go down to the income statement. We're going to do the same process for the income statement. I can't say any numbers yet because I hid them in between columns A and D. Therefore, I'm going to unhide now. So I'm going to put my cursor on column A, drag over to column D, let go and right click on the selected area and unhide. Then I'm going to scroll back down. Now we need to pick up these numbers on the income statement. Now revenue, you'll recall, is a credit balance. Therefore, I'm going to represent it with a negative number up top. So I'm going to say this equals the revenue, and then this equals the sales discounts or allowances, returns and allowances. And again, revenue is going to be a credit. Doesn't mean it's a negative, like a negative revenue. It's a credit up here represented by negative number. And then the returns and allowances is a contra revenue account. Kind of acts like an expense in that it brings down net income. Therefore, it's a debit on this side. So then I'm going to go back over and say the next item is going to be cost of goods sold. It's like an expense. Expense are debit balance accounts. So I'm going to go back down and pick up the expense of cost of goods sold. And then we're going to go down to all the other expenses. So under cost of goods sold, we have the gross profit. That's a subtotal, not adding that. I'm going to put the operating expenses, wages. So now I've got wages down to insurance. I'm going to enter the wages, then autofill to populate the rest of these items. So I'm going to say enter, put our cursor back on here, put my cursor on the autofill handle, left click on it, drag it down, and we're down to, that looks good. We don't need the total here. I'm going to delete that. And then we're going to go back up and go into wages. And I realize we're doing this kind of quickly. It probably will take, if you're new to this, more time to do it. But you want to spend the time to figure it out and be able to figure how you would take financial statements and convert them back into a trial balance. Really useful skill to have. So then we're going to say this equals the 78,400. Then I'm going to autofill it down. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to autofill it down. So I'm going to say enter. I'm going to put my cursor back on it and autofill this down. And again, if you want a much more slow kind of method of this, I do have a course to put together this worksheet or a worksheet similar to this. And then I'm going to left click on it and we're going to drag back down. And so there we have that. So now we've got these numbers pulled over. Next, after the insurance, we have down here the gain on sale of securities. There's going to be 4 accounts here. So I'm going to say enter. And then I'm going to autofill down to 4 accounts, enter. Put my cursor back on it, left click on it, autofill back down. There we have it. Now this is income again. So I'm going to make this credit balance accounts. I'm going to do that by saying not equals but negative of, going down looking for that gain. There's the gain on sale of securities and enter. Then I'm going to autofill that down. I'm going to put my cursor on it, go to the fill handle, left click on it, and autofill down. All right, next item under the interest income, scrolling back down, we're going to pick up the interest on the notes. There's interest on the notes and then the cash charitable contributions. So I'm going to say enter, and then I'm going to put my cursor on it, autofill down, and go back and pick those up. This is going to be equal to, and we'll pick that 445, and then I'm going to autofill that down. Okay, so there we have that. Now I'm out of balance down here because if I sum the entire thing up, I'm at the 247,667, which is summed down here. It's red because something's wrong. And so that means, but note what's wrong, of course, is these two capital accounts. We can check the whole income statement by just highlighting the whole income statement. And because it's debits minus the credits, look how easy that is. We don't have to do any math or anything. Excel says, oh, that should be 355,278. Well, is that what's the bottom line is on the income statement that was provided to us in the financial statement? We have the 355,278. So something's wrong down here. It should be the 355,278. We currently have this 274,722. And actually, something's wrong with this formula. So I'm going to double click on this formula. And we could do this formula again. It equals the sum of, and I'm going to pick all the income accounts. It's going to be the income accounts, sales, starting at sales, all the way down. I'm going to bring that all the way down. And then enter. So we're at the 355,278. So if I scroll back down here, 355,278. So that looks good. Therefore, our only problem then is these beginning capital accounts. What are these beginning capital accounts? How can we figure out what those should be? Now this can be a little bit more difficult for a partnership because we do have the multiple partners here. In this case, we have the two partners. If I go back up to the balance sheet, we see that we have the beginning balances here, the prior year balances of the 119.3 and the 278,367. And so you would think that would, if we could apply that out here, it would work. You would think if I said this was going to be, and these are going to be credit balances, credit balance here because it's a capital account, kind of like a retained earnings account. So we're going to say negative of those two numbers to represent them as credits. But if we scroll down, we're going to say, we're still not in balance. There's still a problem here, even though we have those beginning balances. Now, if that's the case, then what you're typically going to say, well, maybe there's something going on with these capital accounts. For example, maybe something got posted to them. Because like retained earnings, you would think that the capital accounts would have no activity throughout the time period because it's just an account that's going to be rolled into the net income. However, it's possible that we had distributions. So distributions might be posted to the capital account, or there might be distributions in some way. So we would need to see then the detail to see whether there's distributions. And we can go into, if we had the detail, we would want to say, okay, is there anything that was posted to the capital accounts, such as distributions? Or, then we'd have to dig into the detail to find the distributions. We're going to find them down here. We're going to say the distributions are for Tim and James, the 45 and the 105. In other words, this is the amount that was drawn out for it'd be similar to a sole proprietorship. They took this money out, or if it was a corporation, something would be similar to dividends. So we have to take that into consideration. Now, we could post this directly into then the capital accounts. I'm actually going to make these blue, and I'm going to right click on them and make them blue. And that's going to indicate that this is kind of like the middle of the trial balance. Below that is the income statement. Above that is the balance sheet. Now, a lot of people will actually include the distributions into the capital account. Or you can actually make another account, which would be called the distributions or draws from each of the partners. It's easier to see that way, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add another account here, and I'm going to call it the distributions for Tim and distributions from James, or for James. Now, to do that, I'm going to have to add a row. So to add a row here, You could add the whole row, but if you do that, it's going to mess up everything, outside of our trial balance. And the way to do this is I'm going to highlight a way I would do it is highlight all the cells that I want to add. Now I'm going to go all the way over here to U. So I'm going to go from column M to column U, because if I scroll down, I want these items underneath all to push down at the same time. So then I'm going to go back up and I'm going to right click on this area and I'm going to insert. And I want to insert the cells so that they shift down. So I want them to shift down. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to call this draws or distributions for TEM. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add another account under the James capital account. I'm going to scroll all the way over here from M to U, right click on that area and insert. And I'm going to shift these down. OK. And I'm going to call this distribution for James. So distribution Tim, distribution James. And then I did some spelling checks there. So yeah, spell it right there. All right. So then we're going to say these are going to be the debit balance accounts. So I'm going to say for Tim, the distribution, we looked up their distribution possibly in the general ledger for the capital account and said that we had 45,000 there. And for James, we're saying that the distribution that was had was the 105. So the 105. And then if I scroll down, that'll put us back in balance. So now we're in balance, meaning the debits minus the credits equals 0. So the most difficult part of this process is typically to see these areas to get this number right, because it's a little confusing just in and of itself. Because when you think about the trial balance, these are basically the beginning numbers. We didn't pick up over here the Tim capital account. Notice we did not pick up the ending numbers, these numbers, because these need to be the beginning numbers before we roll in the income statement, which is all down here. So this income statement has been broken out, and therefore these would typically be the beginning numbers. However, they could be the beginning numbers plus any activity that happened to them during the time period, which typically would be distributions. So I like to pull out the distributions if possible to give us that detail so we can see the beginning numbers. Then we can see the distributions. We're going to need to know both of those things as we enter this information into the tax return. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is just a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to say, all right, there's our beginning numbers. Then I want to have our adjustments, if we make any adjustments to that, to end at the adjusted trial balance. So all I'm going to do is sum up this column and this column over here. I'm going to use our trusty sum function equals the sum of these two columns. And if this is a kind of an overwhelming worksheet, don't worry. We're going to have a worksheet at each step along the way so you can see the completed process, and you can use the worksheet to do the data input to the tax forms if you so choose. Then I'm going to go to the data, the autofill, and autofill that all the way down. And so that'll make it easy for us to make our adjustments there. And then I'm going to scroll back up and I'm going to do the same thing here. This will be our adjusted, basically, book balance. Then we have any tax adjustments we will put here to get to our ending trial balance for the tax basis. So I'm going to sum up then these two columns and enter. And then we'll autofill that all the way down. I'm going to put my cursor there, autofill that all the way down. And there we have that. And then some basic calculations down below is going to be that net income that we calculated. If I scroll all the way back up, there's the net income. And then we're going to be dealing with these Schedule K and M1 adjustments as we go. We'll talk about them later, but the basic concept is that we're going to be summing up. When we go over here, I'm going to actually sum up the whole column, and then we'll have the adjustments for those items that will only sum up down to here. So we'll see how that works in a step-by-step process as we start to enter this into the system. Next thing we're going to do is start to do the data input, take our trial balance, and enter that into the system. Now note that we're not doing any adjusting entries here. We're basically focusing only on the tax side. If you're doing smaller partnerships, then it's quite possible that you're going to set up some system with your partnerships or with the businesses, or if it's your own business, then you might have adjustments that you'll do at the end, adjusting journal entries basically. So we have courses on adjusting journal entries if you want to take a look at those. Those are the common types of things that might be done at a CPA office or something. You might work with a client and say, put your, this is what you do during the year, and certain kind of journal entries we might I helped you with and make an adjustment entry basically at the year end. Those would be going here. Those would be the adjusting process. We're going to be focusing on this side, having the completed trial balance that we will then make tax journal entries and track that difference within this worksheet.